So we've already looked at two long-term causes of World War I, which were the rise of Germany to power and imperialism. Both of these aspects set the continent of Europe on a much tenser course towards war. Next, we're going to talk about another long-term cause leading up to World War I, which was the alliance system. There had been alliances in Europe prior to the early 1900s. However, usually they were seen as defensive rather than aggressive. This was all going to change with Weltpolitik, which we've already addressed previously. Weltpolitik was started by the Germans, and it put other European countries on edge due to its goals. In fact, Weltpolitik was a classic case of ambition outweighing common sense. The German government wasted a great deal of effort in going after a policy that was costly and led other European powers to regard Germany as a real danger to European peace. Weltpolitik encouraged European powers to side with other countries that shared common goals to prevent an upset in the balance of power. Like we had mentioned with Otto von Bismarck earlier, his web of alliances that were secretive, even though they became known by other countries, the other countries didn't regard them with the same amount of hostility as they regarded Weltpolitik. The first real shift in the alliance system from Weltpolitik came with the Franco-Russian Alliance. Under the terms of this alliance, each power, France and Russia, pledged military cooperation in the event of war against any member of the Triple Alliance, which consisted of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. And their clear aim was to check German ambitions. In direct consequence of this agreement, French investment poured into Russia to support the development of its industry and economy, and close diplomatic and military links grew. So therefore, France and Russia became a lot more friendlier than they had been previous to this. The reason that the Russians made this agreement with France was because even though they had been previously allied to Germany and Austria-Hungary in a previous alliance, Germany had supported Austria in the Bulgarian crisis, which we'll talk about later. This made Russia upset and willing to make an alliance with France. Another major European power that had a response to Weltpolitik were the British. We talked before about how the Germans began to build up their military, which threatened the British. Obviously, the British didn't like to have a challenge to their naval supremacy from Germany. This led the British to start a naval race in which they constructed a new type of battleship. This battleship was called the Hms Dreadnought, and it was superior in its speed, range, and firepower. Ironically, this meant that the other battleships that Britain had were now considered obsolete, and other European countries could construct a battleship similar to the Dreadnought, and basically Britain's numbers would be on the same par as other European powers should they choose to construct so. Obviously, Germany wanted to get a jump on that, so they began constructing ships like this. This started a fever pitch in Britain to try to catch up and supersede the numbers of other European countries, especially Germany. Both Germany and Great Britain were rapidly constructing new battleships. And in Britain, the mood changed about the portrayal of Germany. They portrayed Germany now as a definite threat and an enemy to the British. Another response of the British to Weltpolitik was to start reaching outside its borders, away from its previous policy of isolation, into signing a couple of different agreements. The first of these was the Anglo-Japanese Treaty made in 1902. The reason for this treaty was that it gave Great Britain an ally in the Far East, so therefore they could remove their battleships from that area. After that agreement was signed, Britain also entered another agreement called the Entente Cordiale, which temporarily settled the rivalry between Britain and France over colonial issues and put the British-French relations in a whole new direction. The French and the British had never been cordial with each other prior to this point, but now they were forced to do so because of the new German threat. After the Entente Cordiale was signed between Britain and France, another new alliance system was formed called the Triple Entente. This was made between Britain, France, and Russia after both Britain and France had settled previous issues with Russia. So now there were two main alliance systems in the European continent: the Triple Entente, which was Britain, France, and Russia, and the Triple Alliance, which was Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. During these years, the military and diplomatic balance of power in Europe was turning sharply against Germany, which had only one firm European ally in Austria-Hungary and one somewhat unreliable ally in Italy. The military situation was even more upsetting to the Germans. In 1912, the German army numbered 761,000, and the Austro-Hungarian army was 450,000. Against this were the Russian army of 1.3 million men, the French army of 600,000, and the British Expeditionary Force of 150,000. The naval situation was also of worry to Germany. A great deal of German money had been used to build the new dreadnoughts, but the British had maintained a clear naval supremacy, and now with the support of Russia and France, it could clearly mount a pretty good blockade against Germany. In these bad circumstances, the German press talked of Germany's being encircled by a hostile coalition of envious powers, while leading military figures urged a preventative war to break Germany free from its diplomatic isolation. In summary, the whole trend of European diplomacy was leading in the direction of two power blocks, which were likely sooner or later to go to war with one another. And I'm speaking of the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance. In 1912, German military leaders, once so proud and confident, now grew increasingly pessimistic about how sharply the balance of power was moving against them. So clearly the alliance system had pretty negative effects for the whole continent of Europe, not just Germany, because it made everybody tense with each other and unsure of what was going to happen next.